Hey everyone, today we have the Lowrider post-rebuild service and inspection. Sorry this came out late, but the house was under construction. We didn't have the garage to finish filming, and we'll be doing an oil change as well as inspecting the oil with a comprehensive oil flush through the system. Also, along with that, we're going to be draining and inspecting the transmission fluid, fixing both of our exhaust pipes that seem to be leaking a bit. Possible bracket adjustments needed here. Maybe a minor leak at the front brakes, not sure yet. We're going to check the clutch adjustment, make sure it's okay, as well as making a minor adjustment to the belt tension. Also cleaning, lubricating, and checking the chain. As well as all the other stuff you do during an inspection that I didn't mention during this introduction, so let's get started. I'm making a shelf so I could collect this oil that I'm going to remove so it can be inspected using a 1-gallon container that I had cut and a pizza box in an attempt to be able to not make a mess to drain the oil as well as to collect the oil without corrupting it. Applying some weight to the other side of the shelf. I'll use a 3/4 to open up the oil plug. And this nylon washer I made has been weeping ever so slightly. We'll take it out and yeah, mission accomplished. It's all pouring right into the container, no mess. And I'll pull out the dipstick temperature gauge, put that out of the way, and knock my cardboard out of the way. So much for no mess. As the tank continues to empty, I raise the seat, putting in the AMF tool. I'll unscrew the cap for the oil filter and remove it. Take this filter out and I'm going to drop it in the oil drain pan. While I'm here, I'm going to unscrew the clamp to the return line as part of the flush project. I'm going to remove this hose and just get this clamp off right quick so it doesn't drop anywhere. I don't want to lose it. And I'm just going to partially pull this hose out of the way, just over here for now. I'll get to this later. I have a tool for this. I can't find it right now, so I'm going to have to make do. I'm filling the tank with paper towel, and I'm going to use a screwdriver just to very carefully move it around in the tank to soak up all of that sludge on the bottom. Careful not to scratch the bottom of the tank. Again, this is not the ideal way. Once it's filled up, I pull out the paper towel, all of it, and I'm going to repeat the process over and over again until all that sludge is removed. Pressing in one towel just to cover the inlet, I'm going to use some carb cleaner and spray it around the tank. And we can see the rest of that sludge and material coming out the drain hole with the carb cleaner. A final once over with paper towel. Again, not my ideal tool for the job, but I'm using what I got. And now the bottom of the tank perfectly clean. I use a twisted paper towel to remove any carb cleaner from the top of that oil intake port. So now we're ready to inspect this oil. I'd like to gently hit this magnetic plug with some carb cleaner just to remove the oil, but not any of the metal residue that I would expect to find from break-in, just so we can have a look at it. Again, I am expecting to find some metal particles from the break-in, and I do see it, a very thin paste of metal right here. Of course, I'll be rechecking this on subsequent oil changes, but this was expected. This is fine. Thin enough to get through the filter, but collected on the magnet so it doesn't keep recirculating through the engine. We can see that this is extremely fine metal shavings. So I'll clean up the oil plug now. And this should be good until I replace the gasket. A quick check of the oil filter cap shows everything here looks good. And we can see a thin layer of carb cleaner on top of this oil, but it shouldn't cause any issues for the next test. As I was looking for my magnet, I found the tool that I was looking for from my previous step. So, go figure. Here's my magnet, the last 6 to 8 inches of which I'm going to clean thoroughly before I begin. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to stir it in this oil for a while. And then once it's stirred for a couple of minutes, I'm going to take it out, just wipe off the end here, and have a look at the end of the magnet. And I see that there's no debris or chunks or any other metal that was in the oil other than that which was collected on the magnetic plug on the bottom. So everything in this oil seems okay, no horror shows, we can move on. So I'll dump this oil and cut the container down for the next step. All of this can now be moved out of the way so I can continue onward. I'm going to clean up this area and temporarily reinstall that drain plug with the old washer until the copper crush washers arrive and I can install a new one. I'll also clean up the dipstick and put that back in for now so I don't lose it, and I'll move on to the transmission. I have a special bit that I keep around just for the transmission fill plug. And I just want to get this loose and I'm not taking it off yet. I'll remove the fill level bolt next. This is a 5mm hex. Using a small extension on a 5/8 socket, I'll go under the transmission to the lowest bolt on the transmission. We can see it right there. And I've cut down that milk container to fit. And I'm going to break tension on that bolt just enough that I could get my fingers in there and turn that bolt loose. I've got the milk carton situated as I loosen the bolt and everything's going right in. But right over here, watch this. It turns black for a second and then back to yellow. I'll slow that down so we could see it. Black and then back to yellow. What was that? Now I know what it is. At the time I didn't, but we'll go through that in a minute. I put the drain plug off to the side. We'll have a look at that as well. And this will sit just like this for as long as possible because it's the only way to drain it effectively is time. A light spraying of carb cleaner on this drain bolt shows that nothing sticks to the drain bolt. It's just dirt. It's not magnetic. So I didn't think it was, but I wanted to check. Same thing on a test with a screwdriver confirms it to not be magnetic. So I'm just going to clean up this bolt and put it off to the side. So I was wondering day and night, what is this black contamination that's in this yellow oil? And I was really trying to figure it out, and I hadn't tested yet to see if it was metallic. I'd put a second container under the engine to make sure it wasn't something caught in the container that contaminated it, and this is a clean container. So no, it wasn't. It came from inside the transmission. And the test confirms, again with the magnet, that it is not metallic by any means. Running the magnet through it, it picks up absolutely none of it. Then I ran the magnet in the entire collection of transmission oil. Nothing on this magnet, no metal at all. After reviewing all of my assembly footage, I noticed that all of my parts were coated in Schaefer's transmission fluid, which has a substance in there, maybe graphite or something like that, and that's what we're looking at. No problem at all. So I'll move on to this copper washer, which won't be reused. I'm going to replace this with a new one. And here's that new one. Fits perfectly. I feel like these should be like crush washers, not copper washers, but we'll see how we do with this. So I reinstall it onto the bottom. After I've cleaned the bottom of the transmission, I'll finger tighten it, and then I'll shore it up and torque it down gently as to make a good seal with the copper washer. It never sits center like a crush washer, but we'll monitor for leaks after filling. I'll pack some towels here under the fill hole, because inevitably it's going to leak out of here when we're done. Carefully removing any debris around the top so it doesn't fall into the transmission. I'll put in my funnel. And I'll be using the RevTech 80W90. And right here we reach the fill hole, starts leaking, the transmission's full. So let that funnel empty out. We'll pull the funnel out. We'll start cleaning this up, closing up the transmission, clean up the bottom of that cap before I put it back on. And I'm just going to gently snug it with the ratchet. Remove the towels now, cleaning up the oil around the fill hole. And reinserting the fill hole bolt, screwing it down to light tension. On mine it's like 1/8 of a turn after resistance is felt. Just like that. Transmission is done. We'll make our way back to the oil tank where we're going to remove the oil plug and that nylon bushing. Going to measure it out so I can replace this with a copper crush washer, which again I don't think is ideal, but I'm going to see how this works. because it doesn't seat smaller than the thread size. So it doesn't center. So it takes some effort. As I screw this in, I gotta loosen it, get it centered, loosen, get it centered, and I screw it down, finally centered. I'm gonna tighten this down, and we're gonna see if it leaks. So I'm gonna fill it like halfway with oil. And I'll let it sit for a few days. We'll see if it leaks, or if it doesn't leak, we'll come back to it. We'll do other things right now. Put a piece of paper towel under here later to monitor that. Now I have to get into the primary here to check the clutch and make an adjustment on the belt tension. So we're going to remove all these screws now. Using my 3/16, I'm going to take out all the screws except for that top one where it was situated. That way it's held on. The cover doesn't fall off. Finally, I remove that last one while supporting the cover. Take it off and put it in a safe place. Based on a slight shifting issue that got a little more difficult as it got hotter, it was recommended to loosen this belt just like one click. So I'm going to do that right here, pre-marking this area. So if I lose my position, I know where I was, using a permanent marker, leaving that black spot. And with a 9/16, I'm going to loosen this bearing right here. That's also going to allow for adjustment of the tension of the belt. Just a couple of turns is all it takes. And I could drop this piece down. And I'm going to skip ahead here as I sort of make my way to the right position, retightening it back into position to one notch down is where I want to be. I'll then lock this back down. And the belt adjustment's done. That'll be evaluated on the road. I've incrementally loosened the clutch in testing, but have found with the calipers that these two needed an adjustment to make everything flush. I've got a cable tie on the clutch right now held in, checking for tight spots, and we can see that everything spins really nice. So the clutch is looking good as well. No worries here. Another check is done on the inner primary all around for rubber dust, which shows a malaligned belt, and I do not see any rubber dust anywhere around here. My gasket just fell down, that's fine. But this shows the belt is aligned very nice and no adjustments need to be made or shims or whatnot. Everything's really good. So the primary cover is reinstalled as everything has passed inspection and all adjustments have been made. With this portion of the project completed, we'll move on to the exhaust. Now I had found both exhausts were becoming loosened, necessitating just a reinstallation of the entire exhaust system, starting at the front here. And I'm not going to cover every single detail about this, because I've already covered doing the exhaust in a previous video. We're just going to look and see what we see under here when we remove it and clean it up a bit and reinstall everything and try and find out what went wrong, that's all. So I've cleaned up all the old gray RTV from the front and decked the metal insert that was a bit proud, but nothing else really to say. I found that this bracket was extremely loose, so either it wasn't tightened enough or not tightened at all, a likely culprit in all of this. So I've loosened that bracket so I could redo everything here and ultimately here, because it has to be done in a particular order to seat this up properly before that last bolt goes in at the pipe. So I've adjusted for that and that, because the bolt on the head shouldn't really be supporting all this. These two bottom bolts should really be supporting the exhaust pipe, and that last bolt should just be holding it up into place here, but not with any real effort. I use RTV because none of this is perfectly flat anymore, and this just trues up some of the irregularities inside that port. So I'm going to apply red. Last time I used gray, and I generally use gray to cover the outside because I don't like that red look, and I'll deal with that later. But right now I'm just going to move it around, make it even with my finger. I think this should be more than sufficient. And then I'll install it. And you can see it's already flat and flush before this screw even goes in. This screw, again, is just to shore this up. This is not to really support the pipe. It should just smush some out as I tighten it down slightly, but nothing too crazy. I've already got the mount and the lower bolt below snugged down, so this is just the final screw. And now I'll tighten that lower bolt. And I've cleaned up the RTV. I may put some gray over this later and use that as detection to see if there's any leaks, because it's very easy to see when I put that little smear of gray over it. Removing the rear exhaust now, I'll do a cleanup on that one, clean up the pipe as well, and then reseal it. And this portion of the project's done. We'll see how well it holds. In the event that it doesn't hold, I do have some new exhaust seals that I will throw in. We can see right here they're donut gaskets, but that's only if there's an issue. So we'll move on to the next step. I'll remove my pressure gauge now to get to the oil screen below. On mine, this is a 7/16. Not everybody has a pressure gauge. Obviously, just a screw up top that secures that screen. I then use a 3/4 to loosen the lower portion such that I could just twist it out with my fingers. I'll first remove the spring, followed by the filter. I do see some material caught in the filter, not unexpected, especially for a new build. I would like to check with the strong magnet though and make sure that none of this is metallic, and we can see none of it's coming off the screen onto the magnet, so that's just fine. At this point, I'm just going to wash this with some brake cleaner, make sure all that stuff is removed from the filter. This has also been cleaned out to remove any residual Teflon tape. Take a minute to gently clean around the mating surface of this hole, just remove any debris from here so it makes a good seal. I'll reinstall the screen, make sure it's seated fully on the bottom, followed by the spring, which goes around the screen and fits all the way down. And then I could reinstall this piece, screwing it all the way in, finger tight, and then snugging it down into position, roughly in the angle that it'll face. The gauge has since been cleaned up and Teflon tape is now reapplied to it. After a couple turns, I break it off. And I'm going to score the first couple of turns just so it's away from the oil area or the exposed oil area. I cut off those first couple pieces and screw it into the fitting all the way finger tight as far as it'll go. And then I get one more turn 360 degrees until it's in position and make a final adjustment for my gauge, completing this portion of the project. I'm removing the air filter as part of something special I promised that I would do. But while I'm removing the air filter, I'm going to go a bit further just to open the bottom of the carb, and I have some storage oil on the bottom. I'm going to spray this out anyway, even though the carb was cleaned out before storage. Just make sure everything's good in here. And I'll close the carb right back up. The reason I'm doing this is in my lifter noise video, I said that I'd be replacing the push rods the next time this is on the lift, and this is the next time. My new Andrews push rod's not equally distant. We can see the exhaust side is longer than the intake. Pulling the spark plugs for this project, which are going to be replaced anyway as part of this tune-up. Expecting really sooty plugs, because the last 5 times this was run was at idle, really rich. Yeah, this didn't disappoint. No matter, these plugs are going to be replaced, and we're going to re-inspect these after a nice long highway drive when all this is done. So we're just going to get them out of here. And I'm not going to show this entire thing. I have an entire video dedicated to all this. This is a push rod swap out, and each one of the lifters will be coming out as well, and they'll be cleaned up so that they'll be set up dry like this one. All of them will be checked like this one, good machining, holding pressure with just air, not oil, placed back in, and set up 9 flats in from the bottom with the new push rod, just showing as an example, obviously with all the pieces like this. Following the same setup procedure as in the other video, I complete this one and repeat this 3 more times. Those who saw the charging troubleshooting video know that this battery took quite a beating and it really didn't seem good, so I've removed it and I'm replacing it with this Yuasa battery made in USA. It's an AGM. The tolerance is really tight on my bike, so I want to make sure that it fits properly first. It does not come pre-filled with acid, so with safety glasses, I'll peel the sticker, remove this top, press it onto the battery to break those seals and fill it. This is sped up 6,000 times. I just stay away and let it do its thing. Remove this plastic container, seal the battery, and install it into the bike. That's it. Now we move on to the spark plugs. We're putting 4265 auto lights in, gapping at 40 thousandths of an inch. Mine came with a much narrower gap, so I will adjust and retest. I should get a nice slide at 40, with my terrible focus showing a nice slide at 40. I'll put just a little bit of anti-seize on the threads of each plug. Each plug will be screwed in by hand all the way, then unscrewed and then re-screwed back in to distribute the anti-seize. There should be no problem doing this if the threads are good. I'll admit it always feels weird torquing down a new spark plug because the crush washer makes it feel tighter and then looser and then tighter again. It almost feels like the threads got stripped. Once torqued down, I'll drop the boots back on the spark plugs, and that will conclude the ignition portion of this tune-up. I put some gas in the gas tanks with some Techron, let it sit for a couple hours. It's gas I use for my tractor, not for the motorcycle. I let it sit, and then I let it drain into a gas container, and that way it just sort of cleans out any gum or residue that's on the bottom of the tank. And I switch over to reserve, and I let that clear out as well. And we can see that oil collecting back into this gas tank here, and this gas will be reused in the tractor. Now we set up for the oil flush, my oil return line making its way into this bucket. We won't be needing an oil filter for this process. I'll be filling and monitoring from the cap here as needed. Firing up the bike, we'll see that a couple seconds later the oil return starts making its way into the funnel. There it goes. At this point it's old oil, a lot of it from sumping in the oil cooler, in the top end, in the oil lines and hoses. None of this is new. And I'm going to be filling up that oil tank a lot higher than I generally do. As a matter of fact, about 2 quarts higher than I generally do. I don't want to run out of oil during this procedure. It's going to run for a little bit. And you could see as it's coming out, it looks like more oil's coming out than there really is, because there's a lot of air in the oil that's leaving the system. This is going on longer than it looks because I'm doing some editing, so it's not running as long in the video as it actually happened. Towards the end, as it cleaned up, I let it run a little more just to bring the oil in the tank down, and you can see the larger volume of air in this oil as it comes out in the close-up. The system is now flushed, and there's no doubt that my oil pump is working. We'll take a look at this, and we can see we have nothing but clean oil coming back, albeit with a lot of air in it right now. This flush cost me 2 quarts. Now I'll install my Perform filter model HD1 and secure the filter cap. The dipstick is also cleaned and replaced. I'll break down this setup now so I can remove this bucket from the stand before I spill it. And we could see all the oil and sludge that was removed, and it looks like old oil. It does look bad on close inspection, but it was diluted with a lot of new oil later on. The oil return line is now refitted to the top of the oil tank. Having reconnected my hose clamp beforehand, I screwed down the hose clamp, completing the oil portion of this project. The AMF all-purpose tool is removed and the seat lowered. Now I'm spraying the chain with chain lubricant, and I planned on doing more in this video, but I'll tell you, when I bought the battery, I discovered that Dennis Kirk had so many parts that I needed that I couldn't find a JP cycle that if I went any further, I'd be going out of order. So I'm going to lower this off the jack and wait for the new parts to arrive. And that concludes this video on the 80 Lowrider post-rebuild tune-up and inspection. I hope you found this video enjoyable, entertaining, and informative. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do, and hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. When the next video comes out in this series, a link will be posted in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?